So we are back to the 4x4, and the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to shrink a few pieces a little bit, because depending on how accurate your 3D printer is, you might not be able to fit, and like most likely you will not be able to fit the entirety of the second layer pieces over the third layer. For the outer layer, it will kind of work because it's not engulfing any piece like the second layer does. It's a C shape over this like protruding wing right here. So we're going to use this function known as move face. And what this does is it basically raises or sinks the faces. You can click on this arrow to change the direction. Obviously, I want it to go inwards. So do every face that faces outward. So this is not just this upper face that I'm showing you, but also right down here, the torpedo, because it's directly linking underneath the surrounding pieces. Meaning, if this entire like second layer plus the first layer is a little bit too big, then you will not be able to jam them in between this wing and the top surface of this torpedo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Midge and hide other parts. And then we're going to click on move face to 0.5. And of course, I want to flip the direction so that it goes down rather than it goes up. So I click on both the upper surface of the torpedo and I click on both the top surface of this. Then show all parts. And you notice I've shrank this piece a little bit. And the torpedo is also not perfectly fitting with the corner. It's slightly lower down. So this gives some room for the piece to fit. Okay, I'm going to click on the second piece and click on hide other parts. Then again, this surface is, we're going to we can actually edit the same command and just add on these two faces to the already like existing list of faces. So now this piece is also shrunken, and I'm going to do that to all the other pieces as well. So using one command on multiple pieces works in Onshape, but it doesn't work in SolidWorks. So or at least that's with the version of SolidWorks that I use. So if I was building this in my old SolidWorks, I would have done like one command per piece. Next thing we're going to do right now is we're going to round off the pieces, because obviously this mechanism is so square that if one of the pieces would just misalign slightly, they're going to catch and the cube's not going to be able to turn. So I'm going to click on this Midge, click on hide other parts, and the function that we're going to use is Fillets. And here I'm just going to go with a radius of 3 mm. And we just click on all the edges that we want to round off. In this case, I'm going to specifically use a big value to target all the vertical faces, because that's where the pieces are going to catch against each other the most. By vertical, I mean with respect to the mechanism and the cut lines, not like, because obviously if you look at this angle, these pieces look horizontal, but they're actually the same cuts. Like my definition of vertical is anything that points to the center, sort of, or approximately points to the center, while horizontal is like any concentric circle that goes around the center. So I make sure I can cover as many vertical surfaces as I can. So one thing is that the fillet may not always work. For example, I click on this, because this angle here is smaller than 3 millimeters, so I cannot round the torpedo by 3 millimeters. So what I'll do is I'll just save this command, then I'll start another fillet command, and I'll choose a smaller value. So okay, in this case it works, but it kind of cuts into the piece a little bit. I'm going to use, let's say, 1.5 millimeters. Yep, this one looks good, so I'm going to do that to all 4 corners of this piece. And right now I've covered all the vertical surfaces. For the horizontal surfaces, I will do them later, because in Onshape you can kind of share, like I mentioned earlier, you can share the commands. But of course, if it's SolidWorks, I'll process every piece like one at a time and just use one command per piece. So I'm going to do the T-center next. So I'm going to click on the T-center and click on hide other parts. And here, this is where the cylindrical and spherical mechanisms come into play, because if your cube has a cylindrical mechanism, there will be times where the cylinders don't intersect exactly, and you have like very thin flat surfaces like in between here, and you will need to round them off first. If not, like the software is not going to be able to round this particular edge. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start a new fillet command, choose a small number like 0.5, and then I click on this edge. And now it helps to round off and sort of gets rid of the intersecting point of multiple cylinders. Not really gets rid, but it shrinks it a lot. So now this edge is free, and this edge is also free, and I'll be able to round them later. So this is just an added complication of using a cylindrical mech. With a spherical mech, the spears will interact perfectly and they will not contain such surfaces. Okay, what I'm going to do is because like I want to recycle fillet 2 and 3, I'm going to click on fillet 4 and drag it above fillet 2 and 3. So this means that now the software thinks I've done fillet 4 first before 2 and 3. If I don't do this move, like, and I edit fillet 2 and 3, like with fillet 4 below, I'll show you what that will look like. Then it would, like, when I edit fillet 3, the whole software would revert back to a point where I have not done fillet 4 yet, and these two edges are not free. So in order to make sure that they are free, I have to make the software think I've done fillet 4 first. And likewise, I can now go and edit fillet 3. In this case, I'm going to choose fillet 3 and instead of fillet 2 because this is 3 mm, it's a very big number and this piece isn't that big. So I'm going to choose this one. This is 1.5 and I can click on this piece. It's like click on every vertical edge and just round off the entire piece. So now I've rounded the second piece. So now the center is cut into two parts due to the alignment mechanism. I'm going to hide other parts and do the outer ring first. I can use a very big fillet. So this one is fillet 2 is a 3 mm one. I can just choose that and click on all four of these. And for this one, it's already rounded because of I have to round it first. Otherwise, the cutting of the piece into the X-ring mechanism won't work. That's why it started off round at the beginning of this video. I've done it in episode 2 already. Now that I've done all the vertical surfaces, I'm going to modify the horizontal ones. Notice I didn't do this set of vertical faces because I'm going to use the same number, which is 0.5. So I'm going to hide other parts here again. Click on fillets. Now I have a new command, fillet 5. I'm going to choose 0.5 as my radius. And I'm just going to click on every horizontal face. In this case, I've also noticed that I missed out this vertical face. So what I can do here is I can just save this command and go back. And let's say I'm going to edit fillet 3. I can click this and pretty much edit an earlier command to include these surfaces. And I can now go back and edit fillet 5 again. And yeah, this is pretty much clicking on every horizontal face that exists. And for this one, I purposely want to round off these four vertical faces, even though they're vertical, but I want to round them off specifically by 0.5 because I need the alignment mechanism. And like this piece has to be here. I cannot shave off too much from this particular piece. But when you're doing outer layer turns, like let's say U face turns like that, we don't want this piece to knock into this bump. It's only when we do a move like this from the perspective of this cube is like LW. Yeah, that's when we want this face to catch on, like this piece to catch on this bump. And here's just a bit of bonus content for people who don't know the difference between spherical and cylindrical. Because I kind of glossed over this quite fast in both my first and third episode. So right here, this is a cylindrical cube. You can see that there's a straight line right here, there's a straight line right here, and another straight line right here. This is a spherical cube. So you can see that now this straight line is an arc centered upon the origin, and so is this one here, and this other one right here. When you revolve a straight line around an axis, you get cylinders. When you do that to an arc centered upon an origin, you get sections of a sphere. if you take multiple spears and you rotate them on different axes, you pretty much still get the same exact spear. So they all perfectly overlap with each other in a sense. So because of that, when you cut a cube with a spherical cut, you notice that the corner base is totally smooth because there's no intersection point. Like the whole spear is just one single intersection point. And you can also look at this piece. Notice there's no flaps on the side here. It's just one spherical cut right here. If you rotate multiple cylinders in different axes, they will look different from each other, unlike a spear, which is going to look the same no matter how you rotate it. So because of this, the 3 cylinders at different axes will have intersection lines, and you can see them on the corner right here. You can see them on the X center right here. The top 2 most affected pieces, however, are usually the T center and the wing. So generally, spherical mechanisms tend to be better for doing 3D printing and 3D designing because you have much less of those annoying surfaces to deal with. But a cylindrical mechanism has a much stronger anti-popping capability because now you have this extra foot here. So this piece is pretty much locked in by like 2 anchors, which compared to this one, there's only 1. And if you were to go back to the V-cube era where the pieces are single anchor cubes, not double anchor cubes, you won't even have this foot here, and this piece pretty much has very little defense against popping. Whereas like when the Shengshou cubes first came out, they were still single anchored, but so they don't have this pop ridge here, but they already had these 2 spikes, which help to make the cube much more difficult to pop. So generally for mass production, where they can print things like super thin, or not really print, but like injection mold things that are super thin and like this kind of design is definitely more optimal. But if your 3D printer isn't accurate or if you're afraid that the thin parts may break, you might want to use a design that looks something like this.